Hello, everyone, and welcome to another video interview with the author of the Editor's Choice paper for the first issue in 2023. So it's going to be in issue 53.1. The author is Paul Shuttleworth, who joins me today. Paul, I mispronounced his surname. I do apologize. Paul Shuttleworth. And the author, he's the author of an article called Recognition of Family Life by Children Living in Kinship Care Arrangements in England. The article will be open access because it's editor's choice, and we will talk about why really many people need to read it, not just working and interested in kinship care, but more broadly in terms of children's voice in research. Paul, wonderful to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me here.
My pleasure. Can you say a bit more about what motivated your study?
Sure. So I think from my perspective, I was a practitioner for many years. So, and in the last few years of practice, I was working in kinship care. And I guess I was always really interested in the conversations that were happening around me, especially around kinship care, about where it's placed. Is it placed within fostering adoption? In terms of state support as well. How much should these private family matters have state support, state interference, I guess, in some senses. But also I was really interested in the fact that kinship care is economically beneficial for really struggling local authorities with different kind of cash-strapped local authorities as well. So how all of those things kind of merged together, and where kinship care was very interesting for me. And I guess we used to talk about that all the time. And I remember one time I was kind of sitting with my colleagues, and we were all kind of talking about all these different things, talking about different outcomes as well for children that are living in kinship care. And I kind of walked away and I was kind of thinking, I wonder what children would be saying about this. Would they be talking, if we sat children around the table to talk about their lives, would they be talking in the same way? Would they be talking about educational outcomes? They may talk about school, but I kind of thought, I don't know if they would. So actually, I kind of thought, well, actually, would they add anything to the conversation around kinship care? So that's where it kind of came from.
Amazing. And you did the study as part of your PhD?
I did, yes. So I did it as part of the PhD, and I guess for me, the good thing about the PhD was finding different ways that we can make sure that children's views and voices are included in a way that's meaningful and a way that's ethical. So I used different ways of, I guess, conceptualizing my methods and my methodology, but it was kind of moving away from. A lot of the time when we're looking at policy and when we're looking at research, we use a very kind of what works approach, I guess. And I use kind of what works in terms of, we look at kind of descriptive things and characteristics, and we make inferences from that, and usually large kind of data sets. And I think that's really useful in terms of kind of mapping out how we can see things. But when it comes down to practice, again, thinking about me as a practitioner, I was kind of thinking, well, what does that mean? What can these big data sets actually mean for my practice? But really importantly as well, when we start looking at things in terms of what works, and even when we kind of start co-opting phrases like what works for who, under what circumstances, all of that stuff, if we do that, then we can very easily slip into making these kind of correlations from characteristics such as ethnicity, gender, sexuality, and then trying to fit that into well-established different social work systems, and also kind of make, I guess for me, as someone that belongs to different kind of categories, they make kind of leaps that aren't necessarily true or ethical or well-founded. So I kind of wanted to move away from that and just really put back into the work this whole idea of values motivating us. And actually that's the way for me to start looking at what matters to people, because the values is something that is essential to social work, but it's essential to our daily lives as well. So what matters more will cause us to take different paths and different routes to our lives. So that's where I was coming from.
And what's rooted in the article and the whole of the work is the emphasis on children's voice and children's experience and what matters to them, if I understand correctly. And once we put aside the procedures and processes and politics embedded in a lot of what we do, kind of really kind of placing children front and center and understanding what their views and what their experiences are.
Absolutely.
So what kind of methodologies did you employ to do
that? So in terms of kind of a kind of broader methodology, I looked at dialogical participation. So that's moving away from thinking things are either or is looking at the both and. So children, for example, they're not yet adults, but they are also kind of they're also living their lives as children, but they're also going to become adults. They are vulnerable, but they're also very able. They can be competent and incompetent, as we all can. It's not just children. And so it's moving away from that and looking at the in-between spaces. So the dialogue between when we try to pit things such as kinship care as either something that the state needs to monitor and control or something that needs to be left to the family, is the conversations between those. And those conversations happen between those things in the abstract, but they also happen within us, in our inner conversations in our heads. And I guess it's dialogical is about those conversations between that, but also instigating those conversations. And the important bit as well is that we look at it in terms of ethics as well. So including in the children in those conversations at the very start of research around confidentiality, for example, makes the whole process ethical. So kids will be included in terms of why should this be confidential? What are the risks? What are the benefits? What do you think the possibilities are for it? And you start including children at the very beginning rather than us as adults going in and saying, this is what we've decided and this is how you're going to fit in. So it's so that's the kind of dialogical part. The other part is kind of a critical realist kind of viewpoint and essentially moving away from the descriptive and looking down in terms of the mechanisms, the values that really matter. So using things like Andrew Sayers' work, who's written loads on what matters. So when people ask me about we should now be looking at what matters, I would always kind of direct them to Andrew Sayers' work. So using that as a kind of basis. So that was kind of the basis for the whole thing. Coming down to methods. Now this is really interesting because I wish I knew all these methods before I'd actually started the PhD in my research. So I just use the phrase what matters. And then what I would do is I would introduce myself to the kids and just say what we were kind of doing, talk about kind of ethics, etc. And then I'll just say, right, so I just want you to show me around your house and just show me things that matter to you. Show me around your neighborhood, show me things that matter to you. And they would be doing things and showing me different things such as pictures, whatever it might be, dog leads, all of this kind of stuff. And it was really, really interesting in what they would pick and what they would choose and what mattered more to them. So I would do that, and then I would kind of come back and I would kind of start theorizing about it and thinking, well, where does that fit in terms of the theories that we know? Now, usually in social work, we're very attachment theory heavy, aren't we? So I wanted to use attachment theory, but I also wanted to see if there are other theories and other ways of thinking from other disciplines, such as sociology, education. So when it comes to things like family, kind of this whole idea of Finch Morgan kind of doing family. When it comes to recognition, this whole idea of Honneth, Fraser, this whole idea of how we are recognized by different levels within society. And I go back to the kids and I'd explain, I've been doing this reading and I hope that I've listened to you properly. And this is what these other people are saying. And I'd put it in kind of in the terms that children would understand, and they'd either go, yeah, that's brilliant, or no, you got it completely wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, which is fine, because sometimes I don't. So they were included in the theory building as well. I asked them to have a camera and go off and do some, take some pictures of things that matter to them. and show me. And some kids show me, had lots of pictures of pets, lots of pictures of family members, pictures of clocks, pictures of trampolines. All of these are really interesting things. And again, I'd go away and come back. And then we use kind of different ways of communicating, such as drama, such as drawing, pictures. I try to move away from the typical kind of 3 houses kind of stuff that we use as social workers, kind of eco maps, because I was worried that they would just kind of see me as another social worker coming in and doing the same old stuff. And then I'd come back to them and show them through kind of pictures and words and stories, and hopefully see if what I'd said and what I thought and what we'd come up with kind of matched their lived experiences. So it was a massive kind of process, but at every step of the way, I guess the children were involved, and in most ways the children were leading it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And if we were to summarize, I really want to encourage everyone to become more familiar with your work, for reading the article first and foremost, but also connecting with you and to explore these ideas going forward, because they're so important in terms of embedding how children can become active collaborators in a research process, and in terms of having a say and shaping what matters to them, and for that, how that impacts the social care they're provided with and support they're provided with.
Yeah.
If we were to tease out some key findings that you think are important for social work, what would they be? So
for this article, I focused mainly on recognition. So there's there were kind of different mechanisms, there were different kind of values. And again, it's about these in-between spaces. So when we're looking at recognition, we're also looking at misrecognition. Now, the reason why we think about things like that, we don't think of things as binaries, is because actually, in order to be recognized, in order to feel recognized, you have to know what it feels not to be recognized, to have misrecognition in your life. So things are never either one thing or the other, and it's always about the in-between spaces. So recognition, misrecognition was one of them. Connection, separation was another. And the findings from that are in other kind of work that I've done. And then the last one was around kind of care, independence, risk, those very important topics that are not really mentioned in kinship care literature. So in terms of recognition and misrecognition, the children were really, really clear actually that they didn't feel heard, first of all. They didn't feel that their voices were recognized sufficiently. And they felt that lots of kids had real understanding of the relationships around them. Of course they would do. They understood the little kind of niggles that different people have in their families, whether it might be, you know, this person doesn't like going out for walks, or this person doesn't like long drives, or all of this kind of stuff. So they would do that kind of work, and they would hold that information, the information that we normally miss by just saying to kids, okay, what's your likes, your dislikes, you know, what school do you want to go to? They were kind of negotiating all of those relationships, all of the spaces that were being used within the home, and how to spend time with different people. And they were doing things in terms of not only, I guess, making that kind of family time or contact or whatever we want to call it, making it work for them and the family members, but also beyond. So they were thinking about things like, well, if my grandma is unable to look after me, then what will happen is I will probably go over here and I'll probably stay with my auntie and my uncle. So they were actively permanency planning. And I think that's really important to really, really think about, is that these are I get very frustrated why we're not asking children, because these are the people that are the most able, in some senses, to really understand what will work for them and their families. And that should be our starting point. It shouldn't be the addition. So in terms of recognition, they really struggled with that, but they also struggled with misrecognition in terms of, actually, I don't want to be seen as someone that's part of fostering and adoption. I don't want placements. I don't want to be told about life story work. don't we put into ideas in terms of contact, all these really small little utterances that we have as social workers and researchers that actually they didn't even speak about kinship care. They talk about their family situation. So that was another part of how they wanted to be seen. Now, the important thing is that I don't want to go back to the arguments of whether it's a service or a family. And they also said to me, and it's something that I missed at the very beginning, is that they wanted to feel safe. We don't normally talk about safety when we're talking about kinship care. The kids were really, really clear about that. And the way that they wanted to feel safe was to ensure that they had a safe, secure family arrangement that had been in some way assessed, some way monitored, if it needs to be. So it has to be part of a service, as well as just kind of leaving as responsibility for families, for communities. It has to be in that in-between space. Again, that's what they're doing all the time, and that's what we need to be tapping into. So that's where we were kind of looking in terms of kind of recognition and misrecognition.
Amazing. Do feel free to mention where the rest of the work is published, because it really should be understood as a whole. So beyond the article we're talking about today, what other work have you published on it?
Sure. So it's within a thesis. Now that's kind of that's as a research project. So I've tried to make it as accessible as I can, but obviously I was trying to get a pass in terms of my doctorate. What I've done is I've kind of split it up. So there is something around kinship care in a book by that's coming out in June with Christian Kerr and Robin Sen, who are kind of the editors of it, and that's looking at policy development. There's also some stuff within a book that's a chapter that I've written for a book around how we start thinking about family. I've also very luckily been awarded a research fellowship as well. So I'm writing a book that hopefully kind of makes all of these kind of the children's views more accessible, and the theories kind of that come from it, that are generated from it, accessible, so that we can learn, so that we can start including children's voices and see them as valid when we're talking about kinship care and research in general, but also so that we can start looking at a what matters approach rather than just a what works approach. Those are the other bits. There are also little bits here and there in terms of podcasts as well. So if you just look up my name under podcasts, you'll see different parts where I talk about it.
Wonderful. And it's great because you make clear links between your role as a practitioner and how it shaped your research ideas and led to this work and collaborating with children.
Yeah.
And in many ways, the method and the way you talk about it makes it clear how important these ways of doing research can be also very important ways of doing practice.
Yeah.
And we have, fortunately, another plug for British Journal of Social Work. We have a special issue in preparation on practitioner research. Do you find that what you have learned as a researcher shaped your practice as well and is relevant for social work practice?
I think so, and I think it's vice versa, isn't it? So I also do another podcast. This is a little plug, slightly separate, with my friend Sarah Flagg, who's a practitioner. So there's a podcast called Sarah and Paul Do Social Work, and we just basically kind of chat around kind of social work. We bring in relevant research, but we kind of ground it because we should be. Social work is brilliant. And the reason why it's brilliant is because it's a value-based profession. So obviously that speaks to me, as my research is all value-based. What we do is we use different theories and different kind of ways of understanding and bring them together from different disciplines to not only explain, but also to emancipate as well. And that's so important, isn't it, for social work, that we are on the road to helping to create a better society. Those kind of values that have been installed into me, and building relationships, the value of building relationships has really served me well in terms of my research. And then always at the back of my head, I'm always thinking about actually, how can my research always relate back to practice? How can it always, there always needs to be that link, because otherwise, you know, what are we doing here? I think it's just so important that social work, that we really lift up what the benefits, the marvel that is social work in our research and in our practice, and how special and how brilliant it can be.
And the second part of it is also so linked to human rights that we need to uphold and promote, and advocate for.
Absolutely.
Which really put front and center the importance of children's voice, and you do that so well through this study. So what are you focusing on at the moment? I mean, you touched upon it a little bit about kind of some of the ongoing work, and you have a new fellowship.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are you working on at the moment?
So at the moment, I'm restructuring. So I'm restructuring my thesis, taking lots of bits out and adding new things. But I'm also kind of taking the work across disciplines. So and also very excitingly, kind of internationally as well. So looking at, I'm going to Norway, for example, and looking at how they manage in terms of kinship care, and how they manage in terms of child participation, and just kind of throwing it out there that's actually maybe we can look at things in a slightly different way, and see how that matches or doesn't match, or challenges or whatever it might be in terms of kind of, I guess, the way that we can progress research, but also the way that we can progress practice. So that's really exciting, learning from other different people. I'm kind of like a sponge. I love learning from other different people. The other part of the fellowship is just to talk to organizations, but also really importantly, practitioners and students. So I've been doing kind of that type of work. Again, if anyone would like for me to come and kind of talk a bit more about kind of children's views, but also kind of different methods that we can use to kind of obtain children's views, then they're really welcome to contact me. And it's all paid for by the fellowship, so it's all free. And I just think, you know, these kids gave up so much of their time and so much of their headspace for me, and for us, that we should be listening, really.
Absolutely. Paul, it's absolutely joyous talking to you. So as a starting point, I really want to invite everyone to read the article. It's already available, open access, and it's going to be the editor's choice paper in the first issue of 2023. And I'm really glad that we are opening with this focus on children's voices and how they should be heard in practice and in research, and how all of that links together. Paul, it's joyous talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.